Good morning, everyone. Kevin here from Skywatcher, and welcome to another episode of the What's Up Webcast. We take a look at everything from what's up in the nighttime sky to equipment to helpful tips and tricks. And of course, at the end of the month, we have a special guest to talk about their specialty in the field of astronomy. It is Friday, May 12th, 2023. We're midway through May at this point, but with May comes nightscape season, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, is planning for nightscapes and all of that fun stuff, and I'll get into that here in a second. If you like what you see here on the What's Up Webcast, please go ahead and subscribe, leave a like on a video. It lets us know we're doing a good job. If you have any ideas for a future What's Up Webcast episode, you can email us at info@skywatcherusa.com, title it What's Up, and let us know your idea. We do have the next quarter pretty much planned out, but we're always looking for ideas for the up and coming quarters as well. But we definitely appreciate you guys watching and hanging out with us every Friday. And yeah, this is what we do every Friday morning. So what is a nightscape? I know some of you might not understand what that is. Maybe you're new to astronomy. Maybe you're just joining us. But let's kind of dive into it really quick. Nightscape is basically a landscape captured at night. It's that simplistic at that point. So we call them nightscapes. These are generally fairly scenic locations, but they can really do anything that blends a landscape foreground with a, sky, essentially. Generally, this is very popular with the Milky Way. You're probably shooting over some fairly scenic location. But this can really be done anywhere. And it can be done in all different kinds of ways as well. There's a lot of different techniques out there. There's the single shot technique, which is the image you see there, my shot of the Grand Canyon and the moon rising. That is a single shot. There's nothing fancy about it, no special equipment. There is composite, where you would take a picture of the foreground, usually during like golden hour or some time frame before the sun goes down, so the landscape is kind of illuminated. And then you would shoot the night sky and then composite those two together. I have my opinions on that type of shooting, but we're not going to get into that. And of course, then you have tracking mounts and no tracking, and there's all kinds of specialty equipment that you can do for nightscape photography. But that's basically what nightscape photography is. It's blending the night sky with a nice landscape. And yeah, typically you start hearing a lot about nightscape photography about May, because the Milky Way is generally rising around midnight at this point. And as we move into June and July, the summer Milky Way becomes very prominent here in the Northern Hemisphere. So a lot of times people will say this is nightscape season or Milky Way season. Honestly, you can do a nightscape at any time of the year from any location. The winter Milky Way is very elaborate as well. It's not as bright and defined as the summer Milky Way is, with the core over there in Sagittarius and Scorpio. But the winter Milky Way has a bunch of other stuff floating around in it. Lots of nebulas. You just probably need to be a little bit more in tune with different types of techniques to shoot the winter Milky Way, because it's fainter. But there's a lot of cool gems up in there, where the summer is big and bright and easy. So, but yeah, that is a nightscape. Real quick question here. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now, but it's here. How much better will a 3 nanometer filter be versus a 4.5 and a Bortle 4 or 5? I know this is off topic. I just want to hit it while we're here. 3 nanometer is basically as narrow as you can go. There are some narrowband filters available on the market that are a little bit lower. There's some new ones from Antlia that I think are like 2.8. You would probably see a difference in a light polluted location with a 3 nanometer versus a 4.5 nanometer for imaging. You would notice a difference in contrast. You probably will also notice a difference in the price. But honestly, at the end of the day, if you're in a light polluted location, if you're doing narrowband like HA03S2, Um, H alpha and sulfur 2 are in the red part of the spectrum. You'd probably be okay with 7 nanometers or narrower, because there's no moonlight. There's not a lot of light pollution in the particular part of the spectrum that sulfur 2 and hydrogen alpha sit in the reds. Obviously, the narrower band passes are going to give you more contrast as you get more on band. But honestly, if you're doing HA and S2, I'd probably get something in that 7 nanometer or narrower band pass. If you're talking O3, get as narrow as you can afford, because moonlight and light pollution can affect that particular part of the spectrum where oxygen 3 sits. So spend more money on your O3 than your H alpha or sulfur. My particular opinion is I think sulfur filters are a waste of money, because there's not a lot of targets that have a lot of emission in the sulfur 2 portion of the spectrum. Yeah, you can do Hubble palette with them, but they tend to be expensive, and having owned 3 different sulfur filters, I rarely ever used them. I would have rather saved money, not bought the S2, and dumped more into the O3. So if you want my opinion and you're building a narrowband set, HA03S2, and you want all 3, my recommendation would be 5 to 7 nanometer band passes on the H alpha and the S2, and as narrow as you can afford on the O3, preferably 5 nanometers or 3 nanometers if you can do it. That's how I would build the wheel there, and that's how we have it on our remote observatory. Our S2 and H alpha are 5 nanometer, and the O3 is 3 nanometer. Always go as narrow as you can afford on the O3. You get more time to use it because it gets rid of more light. So I know that was completely off topic, but I love talking about filters. I think they're really cool. That would be my recommendation. Is you would probably notice a difference between 3 nanometer and 4.5 nanometer. But it depends on the band pass that we're talking about. So get as narrow as you can afford. All right, back to our general talk. We should have you guys will have to let me know in the chat if there is a Ask Kevin email address that you want. Like if there's a particular question that you want to ask me that regards to something that we're talking about, maybe we should build an email that are questions for Kevin or something like that. If you think that's a cool idea, throw it in the chat. If you think it's stupid, let me know. So anyway, back to nightscape photography, now that we talked about filters for 5 minutes. Equipment. So when it comes to nightscape photography, nightscapes are pretty much the most basic form of astrophotography that you can do. It doesn't require a lot of very technical stuff like general deep sky astrophotography does. You can get away with very off-the-shelf equipment for this. Number one is you're really going to need a camera and a lens. DSLR, mirrorless, whatever the heck is out there. Most of the cameras on the market nowadays from like Canon and Sony and Nikon and Fuji, as well as all the other ones that I didn't name, they all will pretty much be doable for nightscape photography. The processors on the camera now are generally very good nowadays at reducing noise and all the other garbage that happens inside it, where older cameras, the technology wasn't quite there. If you bump the ISO up too much, it gets too noisy. Also, I'm also talking shop and terminology, assuming that those of you who are watching know what you're talking about when it comes to nightscapes. If you don't, we have done episodes here on the What's Up Webcast that you can go back, and it's nightscape basics and all the stuff that goes along with how to do a nightscape, what you might need. So this episode is going on the assumption that you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, you can go back and do our nightscape basics where we talk about ISO and lenses and all that stuff. That's already out there and exists if you need to know more about that. So If you are doing nightscape photography, a camera and a lens, this is my Canon EOS R, and I rented this lens. It's a Canon 35 f1.4L Mark II. Amazing piece of glass. If you want to save some money, the Tamron SP35 is a really nice chunk of glass, and it gives you the same specs, and I think it's a little bit better for a lot less money. But generally, if you're doing nightscape photography, you're probably shooting wide angle to get your foreground as well as the night sky and a nice chunk of the sky. So if you're doing that, I would probably recommend something between 14 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Any of those are going to work. Right now, I'm using a 1635 f2.8 from Canon. That's kind of my Milky Way lens. There are other lenses out there, like the Sigma 20 millimeter Art is phenomenal, and it's f1.4. Probably the greatest lens I've ever used for nightscapes is the Sigma Art 14 millimeter f1.8. That thing is a monster, and it's f1.8. It's crazy. The Irix 15 f2.4 lens is also very nice. The Irix lenses are cool because they aren't autofocus, so you're saving yourself some money. And they have this really cool feature where the manual focus ring actually clicks into position at infinity. So when you're doing nightscape photography in the dark and you're trying to focus, you can actually tactile feel that click when you get to the focus point. So it's actually kind of nice. So the Irix lenses are pretty cool, and they're pretty cost effective too because they don't have all the bells and whistles like autofocus and stuff like that, which you don't really need for this type of work. So really any camera can work. Most lenses between 14 and 35. You can go longer, like 50 or 85, but when you start to get into the more telescopic lenses, or telephoto lenses, you're reducing the amount of exposure time you have, and you might need a tracking mount, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, because everything's moving. You're also going to need a tripod. You don't need a carbon fiber tripod, really just any decent tripod, but make sure you get yourself a decent tripod because the tripod is the foundation of your whole shooting experience. And if you have just some cheap thing that you got off of Amazon that wiggles in the wind, your shots aren't going to come out very good because the whole thing's wiggling. You can have the best camera in the world, and if it's moving, all your shots are blurred. So invest in a nice tripod. And once you have a nice tripod, you really aren't going to need one for a while unless you need something bigger. I have a Photo Pro tripod. It's a Eagle 6. Anyway, it's a gimbal head tripod, carbon fiber. Very nice tripod. Way more than you probably need. But you can get a nice tripod for, a couple $100 will get you a very nice tripod that will last you for years. What's a good tripod? The Photo Pro tripods, like the one you see here, are awesome. There's a wide range of different tripods that you can get. I mean, you can just go on Amazon and look up photo tripods like I'm doing right now. And there's decent stuff out there. So, but you're probably looking at, don't buy the ones that are going to be like 15 or 20. You're probably going to want something that's around the $100 plus mark because it's going to have probably a nice ball head with it and it's rigid. But there's a lot of nice tripods that are out there. You don't need carbon fiber unless you want to save some weight. But like this Photo Pro X Aircross tripod that's right there, that works really well. Here's probably a cheap little thing that would work. Cheap, I say. Here's all this right here. That one's pretty cool. It's carbon fiber. It's $130, but make sure you get yourself something that is decent. Invest in it a little bit, but there's a bunch of good tripods out there. But you don't need carbon fiber. carbon fiber is nice if you need it, and it lightens the weight a little bit. One piece of kit that I think a lot of people overlook, a red flashlight. A red flashlight goes a long way because you're out in the dark. You need a flashlight. You can get a decent little flashlight from pretty much anywhere. Celestron sells some nice ones. I'm sure there's some cheap ones that you can get off of Amazon. This right here is probably the best flashlight you'll ever get. This is the Hotech. I forgot what they call it. I think it's an Astro Aimer or something like that. This is a very nice flashlight. I have one of these. It has white light in it, has red light, and it has a green laser pointer all in one. And I think it's even waterproof. And it's built to last. My last one lasted forever. I had to get another one, but they make a couple different versions of it. This one's the upper level one, but these are very high quality. They run off of like 3 AAAs, but it's got the white, the red, and the laser's kind of cool. But a nice red flashlight is something that you should have in your kit at all times, just because you're working in the dark. You need to preserve your night vision, so red light is generally helpful. Having the white there if you need it. Of course, if you're at a star party and you flip a white light on, you will be destroyed. So have the red light. I'm not a big fan of headlights unless it has the red first, because headlights generally, they're very bright. And if you're out with a group and you're all there to just do that, that's different, or by yourself. But if you're out in like a star party location, you want to make sure that your lights aren't blasting everybody around you, because just because it's red doesn't mean it's not bright. So a nice flashlight is something that you want to have on hand. Headlamps are very nice. Just make sure it is red. I just like the ones that click red before they go white, or the ability to switch one or the other, not where you have to, click all the way through. But a red light of some kind is a definite must that you should have in your kit. And actually, anything astronomy, you should have a nice red flashlight somewhere. Preserve your night vision. Of course, tracking mounts. This is a little bit more of the specialty stuff. We'll kind of go into this later. The tracking mounts like the Star Adventure or similar stuff like the Ioptrons or Move, Shoot, Move, or there's a bunch of stuff out there nowadays for Nightscape. But a tracking mount is going to allow you to do longer exposures or reduce your ISO and track it without the stars blurring. So that is something that you could add to your kit. We're getting into more of the specialty equipment at that point, which I'll kind of elaborate on as we get a little bit further down the road. Of course, the biggest thing that you need to figure out first and foremost is finding a site where are you going to go shoot these pictures. And let's see. Addendum on the tripod, get reflective tape. Yes. People hit their tripods all the time. All the time. The worst story that I have about someone hitting a tripod was in 2017. I set up a bunch of different tripods for people for the eclipse. And this is in Wyoming. I got up at like 4 in the morning and set up like 6 different equatorial mounts so I could get them polar aligned before the day got started. So everything was dead on. I got a couple people with Star Adventurers. And unfortunately, Star Adventures being small, the tripods are generally smaller. This is why I like beefier tripods under my Star Adventure, or this is also why I like the Eagle tripods from PhotoPro, because they have spikes that dig into the ground where they don't move. So I had set up a Star Adventure for someone, and 2 minutes before totality hit, they kicked the tripod and lost the polar alignment. So 2 minutes before totality, the tripod was kicked, lost it, couldn't do anything about it. They were able to manage it, but the time lapse that they were trying to do was gone. So a nice sturdy tripod is something that you want in the dark. Make sure you have reflective tape. I really like 24-hour glow tape. All my stuff has 24-hour glow tape on it because you can see it in the dark. And it's very low glow, very subtle, but it's enough for you to be able to see the tip of the tripod for not only your safety, but to ensure that someone doesn't trip over it and obviously shift it. So yeah, good. That was a good recommendation from Marcus in the chat. Anyway, finding a site. Obviously, taking a nice nightscape picture is something that is going to require a decent location. Of course, you could shoot it in your backyard, but the sky's probably going to look terrible, and I don't think anybody's going to want to see the rooftops of your neighbors. It's not scenic. Dark sites are going to provide the best locations for you to shoot nightscapes because you're looking to capture the Milky Way or a lot of that faint detail in the nighttime sky, and you need to get away from city lights. Now, generally when you do this, you're going to look at a light pollution map, and this is a light pollution map right here. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. This is darksitefinder.com. You can go there right now, pull it up, and it has I think it has the whole world there, and a lot of these famous dark sky sites are already charted around the world there, which is very nice. You can see why Australia is awesome for stuff like this, because basically the entire continent is ultra dark. Of course, everything there also wants to kill you. But the US, you can see right there, basically, once you hit the middle of the country, it just explodes. So for nightscape photography, you want to go to Dark Site Finder or something similar, get yourself a light pollution map, and you want to start looking for dark locations. Now, what is considered dark? Dark is generally anything that is green, blue, gray, or black. Those are the best places for nightscape photography to start. But green is going to be the minimum on a light pollution map that you want to find. So I'm talking about the light limey green. Then if you get to the darker green, that's better. And then if you go in order of how the darkness chart actually goes, the Bortle scales is what it's called. Green is about the point where you really start to notice detail in the Milky Way. Blue, the night sky is very nice. A very established Milky Way is visible. Once you get to the grays and the blacks, the sky is essentially perfect at that point. So the darker the better, but minimum you're looking for a green location. You can see the Milky Way in like a yellow site, but you really need to make sure that the darker part of the sky is the southern portion of the sky. Scenic locations are going to be ideal. You're looking for some place that's nice, that looks nice, not just like a road in the middle of a town. So beaches are cool, national parks. I will say this, if you are doing something in a national park, please make sure to support your national parks by paying to enter the park. If you are offering workshops, national parks require a special permit for you to have workshops in the parks. Make sure you have that permit. The national parks are preserved for people to take advantage of nature and keep it pristine. Yes, I know you don't like spending extra money, but all the money is going to keeping those parks and their staff functional for many years to come. So if you want to enjoy the parks, support the parks. So national parks are awesome. Beaches are awesome. Anything that's interesting, geological is cool. But the cool thing about Nightscapes is you can be creative. Go out, do something different. See what you can find. Go camping. Let's see if I can find some. Here's a shot. This is from Texas Star Party, which, by the way, we will be at next week. So we hope to see you there. The weather looks a little so hopefully it changes. But this is from Texas Star Party. It's not a great nightscape by today's standards, but it's pretty cool with it silhouetted there. But be creative. You can do all kinds of things. Let me see what else I have in here. This is probably one of my best shots I've ever done, and I've never been able to do it better. This is a mosaic from Grand Canyon Star Party that I shot a couple years ago. This is taken from Mather Point at the Grand Canyon. And it's a mosaic with moonrise and the Milky Way and all that. That's very scenic. No tracking on this either. So I think this even is coming up in my presentation. So I kind of jumped ahead. But one thing you want to make sure when you're picking a site, particularly at Dark Site Finder, is you want a site that has a good southern horizon. Particularly if that's a darker location, you want the darkest part of the sky to be in the south, because that is where the Milky Way is going to be visible. You don't want to find a dark site location and you find out that the big town is just south of you, and you're going to have the Milky Way there, your nice scenic location, and then this big dumb light dome peeking over the mountains or something like that. So you can get around that if you can, but if you are looking to get really good nightscape locations, you want to make sure that, particularly if you're in like a green zone or you're not far from a city, it's best that the city be behind you or in the east or in the west, because the southern part of the sky, particularly in the summer months, that's where Scorpio and Sagittarius and all that, they all come up, and that is where they're going to be. So you want to make sure you have a good southern horizon to shoot the Milky Way and the core coming up, and that's not going to be hindered by some, big old light dome. So make sure you've got a location that has good southern horizons. Here's that mosaic I was just showing you guys, or panoramic. This is an untracked panoramic. This was with my Sigma 14. This was several years ago at this point. I don't have the lens anymore, and just stitched it all together and been pretty happy with the way that came out. But that's a nice nightscape example there. There are people that are so much better at nightscapes than I am. It's really an art form, but there's some really nice images out there on the internet, and Instagram is very popular for nightscape photographers to share their stuff. So you can go out there and find out what's what and how to do it and all that. So it's get creative and try to go out and try something new. So in nightscape photography, there is some specialty equipment that you can use depending on what you're trying to do, or maybe you're trying to try, add some signature looks if you want. Number one, filters can provide a unique look for your images. This one, the light pollution filters, if you're shooting in a sky that might have some light pollution kind of coming into it and you want to get rid of it, you could use a light pollution filter. There are special light pollution filters for like camera lenses that can thread on the front. There's several different makes, but the one I use the most is the Nisi Natural Night. Nisi is Nisi. And that works really well. I have two of these guys. I'm going to try to find this and put it in the chat if you guys want to check it out. This does a very nice job at kind of keeping the look of the night sky fairly normal, but does reduce the amount of light pollution that's coming in there. Let me see. Natural Night. Here we go. I'm going to put the Nisi filter link in the chat. I've worked with Nisi for a couple years, and this is actually a very nice filter. They're not terribly expensive either for what they are, and they make sizes for pretty much all the logical thread sizes that you might need. So the Nisi filters are very cool. There's other brands out there as well. I can just tell you from experience that the Nisi Natural Night does a good job. Another one that can get kind of unique is mist filters. This is a very artistic look that some astrophotographers use. A mist filter is generally used in photography when you're doing like portraits to give it this very soft glow. But you've probably seen these shots before where the stars look pretty good, and then the big constellations, the stars look huge and they're pronounced. And a lot of times what a photographer will do to get that look is during a long exposure, they'll put a mist filter to diffuse the light for just a few seconds in the shot. And then that way it comes up to where some of the smaller, dimmer stars still look pinpoint, but the brighter ones will be diffused, and give you kind of this unique look. You don't see them all the time, but you can get this very ethereal look to it. And just because I am talking about filters I've used, I do have a Nisi diffused filter, a mist filter. That's what they call it. Here's the Nisi mist filters. Again, they make these in all different sizes, just like the natural nights. They're not too expensive either. They work very well, and you can get them, thread them on your lenses. You can get a big one and just put it in front of the lens for a little bit if you want to, but the Nisi mist filters work. There are other ones out there as well. You don't have to get Nisi's, but I like the Nisi filters. The build quality is very good. The lens, the cells are nice and gripped. But yeah, that's the mist filters. I'll put that in the chat just in case anybody, wants to check those out as well. But yeah, those are kind of some specialty filters that you can get. There's also starburst filters as well, which have these little things that refract the light and scatter it to give you the star points on your stars. Another thing that you can get, you might have to go to like B&H Photo to find a filter like that. It's kind of a specialty filter, the starburst filters. But then there's other stuff that you can do that's specialty as well. We'll talk about lenses in particular, like fisheye lenses. Fisheyes I have not tried a lot. The reason I haven't messed with a fisheye too much is because they are a specialty lens. They're unique. And they're going to give you that fisheye appearance. Now, you want to make sure when you're buying a fisheye or renting a fisheye that you kind of understand how much field of view you're going to get. Because there's not every fisheye is going to give you that 360 degree field of view. So you want to be kind of aware of what you're looking for and what you might need in order to get the look that you're looking for. So fisheyes are a particular lens that are kind of specialty. You could use them for nightscapes and get a very unique look that way. Nisi, once again, it just happens that they have all this stuff. Nisi has a very interesting lens, which is pictured here. They make two of them now. This is the 15mm f4, and it's a starburst lens. They call them Sunstar lenses. I have not played with one of these yet, but they're rather interesting because they give you that effect. I'll bring these up real quick. They come in all different mounts. They're actually one of the few companies that make an RF mount for Canon, which is interesting. But they're not terribly expensive. But what's kind of cool about this lens, and I hope to try one, is they have a special piece inside of them, which I don't know if it'll show it. I don't think it shows it. But anyway, there's a special thing inside of it that allows you to get the star bursts where you get the spikes. So it looks really cool with the sun, but probably on brighter stars. Being that this is a very wide angle lens, on bright stars, you can get that starburst effect as well. So not only is it a nice wide 15mm lens, it's f4, which isn't terribly awesome for astrophotography, but it's not bad. This might be a unique thing as well. I'll just put this in the chat too, even though you guys are seeing it. Boop. And the 15mm actually handles full frame, but they do have a 9mm that they released that's f2.8 that works for crop sensors, which is actually nice. And this one actually looks like it's weather sealed too, which I love weather sealed lenses. So, but yeah, they have two different versions. There's the 9mm and the 15. So that would be kind of another specialty lens because it's going to give you that Sunstar spike look to it. So check those out if you're interested in one of those. But that's just kind of some specialty stuff. And of course, Another specialty piece of equipment is a star tracker. So a star tracker is basically a small little equatorial mount that you put your camera on and it tracks the night sky as it moves. And basically that's what our star adventures are good for. So if you need a tracker, let me bring those up. You can actually get a star adventurer, a 2i, a mini, a GTI, whatever it is. There's the Star Adventurers. If you're not familiar with them, they are available right now. These are basically little mounts that you pop your camera on. You'd polar align it or align it onto the North Star, and you would let the mount track. And the advantage of using a tracker is you can reduce your ISO and increase your exposure, which actually reduces the noise in your image. So a tracker can help give you a little bit cleaner look. Now with Nightscapes, if you're shooting too long, your foreground is going to blur and your stars are going to look great. So that's why some people do composites, is they'll shoot a really deep image of the nighttime sky where they're using a tracker and they're taking multiple images over and over and over and they're stacking them to get a really nice detailed night sky. And then they'll work and add the foreground in from another image in post-processing. You can do a half sidereal rate on the Star Adventure. It's the 0.5x tracking rate. That is made for Nightscapes because it's tracking at half the rate of the stars, but it's not tracking so much to where it's better than nothing, but it's also not blurring the foreground too much as well. So you can start to do a little bit longer exposure if you're using like a Star Adventure at half sidereal rate or that 0.5x. So you can get more detail in the Milky Way and your foreground doesn't look as washed out and blurred as, say, no tracking. So that's a helpful little thing. But that's part of the specialty equipment that you could have is, filters are helpful. They can add some artistic flair. You got specialty lenses to give you a much wider field of view, or if you want to get that starburst look, you have like the Nisi lenses. And then, of course, you can use a tracker to assist in longer exposures. I know there's some questions here. Let's see. Speaking of trackers, for the Star Adventure GTI, if your payload is properly balanced on both axes, can you go higher than 11 pounds? You can do whatever you want with your equipment, but I would not recommend going over the listed payload limits of whatever mount you're using is. It's not so much that you're going to break it. I've had people overload Star Adventures like crazy, but you start to lose rigidity the closer and closer to the max payload of the listed mount. And if you go over it, there's not really a question of how stable the system is going to be. So could you do it? Probably. Would I recommend it? No. So I would stick under the listed payload capacity, or if you do want to push it, you're doing so on your own risk. And if your stuff falls over and breaks because the wind pushed it over, do not call us asking us to replace your lens because we listed the payload. So any required filter when using an EOS RA camera or shoot straight. For those of you who don't know, Canon has come out with several generations of modified cameras. There was first the 20DA, the 60DA, and then most recently was the RA. Modified cameras are basically cameras, they're mirrorless or DSLR cameras where the filter that sits inside of the camera body has either been removed or replaced with a variation of something else. Because the problem with a lot of these stock cameras is the built-in filter is made to work best for daytime shooting. But unfortunately, if you actually look at the filter graph where it shows you the light throughput of the filter, most of these stock off-the-shelf cameras, the filter blocks a lot of light in the red part of the spectrum, which is where a lot of the nebulas like emission nebulas emit their light. So it's going to be very muted. So a lot of people get these modified cameras, and that's probably another thing under specialty equipment that I could have added. We're just going to talk about it, is you can get a modified camera as well. A modified camera is going to allow more light to come into the sensor, or maybe more specific wavelengths of light like hydrogen alpha to pass onto the sensor and give you more clarity and contrast when you're shooting the nighttime sky. So one of those off-the-shelf options was the Canon EOS RA. Very limited production of these cameras. They don't make them anymore, so if you can find an RA, they're pretty awesome. If not, you can always buy a stock camera and send it to, there's several places that will modify the camera, and you can modify it to whatever filter that you want. So any required filter when using the RA? No, there's nothing I would use particularly. The RA is going to have a pretty decent advantage over a stock camera because the filter inside the camera is already modified to allow more light in the hydrogen alpha side of the spectrum, or that wavelength, 656 nanometers, to pass through the filter and hit the sensor. So the nebulas are going to pop. So an EOS RA is kind of good to go out of the box. You're already ahead of the game in comparison to most people. So there's nothing I would use with your RA. Maybe a light pollution filter if you're in a really shoddy sky. But if you're in a dark sky, I'd probably just use it straight. Of course, you can always mess around if you want. Let's see. Any charts on how long you can expose at 0.5x with a certain lens? No. We don't have a chart. It'd be interesting to do that. I might have to put that together at some point. But it's really going to depend on what lens you're using. On wide angle lenses, like probably that 35 to 14 millimeter focal length, you could get away with it for a while. On longer lenses, probably going 50 millimeter and longer, you're probably going to have a more noticeable time at that point. That's a good idea for charts. It might be something we have to look into on how we're doing it. Let's see. What else is in here? Let's see. The 11-pound payload for the StarVenture GTI is just the payload. Yes, all of the payloads that Skywatcher lists for mounts is the physical payload of the mount itself. Whatever equipment you are putting on there, that is how much we recommend putting on there. We do not include the counterweights in the payload capacity. Counterweights are their own thing. They're doing their own thing. But yeah, they are not included in that 11-pound capacity or any of our mounts. The capacity is how much of your equipment you can put on there. Yes, H-alpha filters are 656.28 nanometers is what you're looking at. Let's see. StarVenture GTI. Can I drill onto some spots to put grub screws to prevent rotation? I wouldn't be drilling anything on a StarVenture GTI. Again, once you buy it, you can do whatever modifications that you would like to do to it. But if you break something on it, you tell us you basically drilled into it, you'd be paying for parts at that point. Usually a lot of the tripods that you're going to be mounting a StarVenture GTI to have like a rubber mat on top of them where it'll grip it, the metal foot of the StarVenture GTI. So you shouldn't have too much problem with rotation. The only time you should be having any issues with rotation is if the threads are stripped at that point, because the threads should lock you down unless you're really pushing on the mount and you're loosening it up. But I wouldn't, as someone who works for the company and who's done repairs, I'm not going to tell you to drill into anything that is our product. So what you do on your own is all you at this point. So first time I've made it live. Welcome, Deep Sky Sanctuary. Thanks for joining us. But yeah, that's pretty much it for planning Nightscapes. Again, a lot of this episode was really just stair steps on previous episodes that we've done. We have done, shooting with a sky tracker. We've done Nightscape basics and cameras and modified cameras. We have a lot of episodes that kind of go into detail on the topics that we kind of covered today. So if you need to go back and you want to know more of the in-depth detail of when do I need a tracker? How do I shoot this? How do I shoot that? We have a lot of episodes in our library of previous What's Up webcasts that we've done that you can go get all that information from. But if you're planning an outing for Nightscapes, basically what you're going to want to do is make sure you have a nice camera. Make sure you have a decent tripod to put the camera on. And a decent lens, probably 14 to 35 focal length, somewhere in there. And at that point, you're pretty much ready to go. Then you're going to have to find a site. Where are we going to shoot? Probably somewhere dark. So you're going to want to plan ahead, make sure there's no moon in the sky. That's a big one that I should have covered earlier. But you're going to want to make sure that you also are paying attention to the moon phases, because a lot of times you're going to want the moon to be out of the sky. So you're going to be shooting at thin crescents or once the moon has gone down, whatever it is going to be. So any suggestions on processing programs for Nightscapes? There are a lot of different programs that you can do for processing Nightscapes. I use Lightroom and Photoshop primarily. I think those are a must to have, particularly Photoshop is what I like doing a lot of work in. There are other ones out there. There's a few that I can't even remember the names of them, but there are a lot of cool, that's it. Sequator is a really good program that you can get. So that would be one that I would look at, is Sequator. And then, of course, Lightroom and Photoshop are there to make the adjustments and stuff like that. So those would be probably the big programs for that. So thank you, David, for recommending that. Let's see. When is Skywatcher Strainwave Drive coming out? I don't know. Maybe we'll have one. I can't say anything. There's nothing I have in my possession right now for testing that says we have a Strainwave. So right now we just have regular equatorials. I'm sorry, we don't have the fancy drives. So let's see. I think that is pretty much it, unless you guys have any more questions. I don't see any else floating around there. But if you like what you see here on the What's Up webcast, please go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like on a video. Lets us know we're doing a good job. If you have an idea for a future episode, please email us at info@skywatcherusa.com and title it What's Up. Definitely appreciate all that. Oh, here's one. I kind of missed the beginning, but we didn't cover mobile apps, right? No, there are a lot of apps out there that do cover planning a nightscape shot. We actually have a whole episode on apps. So you can actually go back to our app episode, and we actually do go into detail about all types of apps. There's one I cannot remember for the life of me at the moment that we do cover, but you do have to buy it. But it does allow you to plan out nightscapes. I don't have it on my phone at the moment. I don't remember what it is, but there's a very cool one where you can point your phone and it shows you like when the Milky Way is coming, when golden hour is. It's all of that. But we do talk about it in our app episode that's in there. Also, you could use Sky Safari and stuff like that to see when the Milky Way is going to be where and stuff like that. So if you want to know about apps, we do have a whole episode that covers apps for planning. So apps are very helpful as well. I like Sky Safari the most. But that's pretty much our episode for planning nightscapes. Again, a lot of this is built on previous episodes, so if you want to go into detail about various things, you can go in and check all that out and all that fun stuff. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Star Adventure history and its evolution, and I will let you know it's a little bit of a short episode. But we will be in Texas next week. So this is a pre-recorded episode for next week. It's airing at 10 a.m., just like all the other episodes that we've done. And again, we will be at Texas Star Party next week. So if you're there, come say hi. We will have Star Adventure GTIs there. CQ350s will be on display. But we will be there on site from Tuesday to Saturday. The weather is looking very bad at the moment, but we will try to find a place where we can at least showcase the equipment so you guys can come say hi. But we will have gear out there. If you're there, come say hi. Hopefully the weather changes and we can get out and actually shoot and show some stuff off as well. But next week is a pre-recorded episode airing at 10 a.m. We'll be talking about the Star Adventure and its history. But that's it pretty much for this week's episode for planning Nightscapes. So get yourself a good camera, nice wide angle lens, good tripod. Get yourself out to a dark sky site, preferably something that has a clear southern horizon and no moon, preferably, and have a nice flashlight with you. And you should be good to go. Also, if you're ever going to a dark sky site, make sure someone knows about where you're going, because a lot of times you're going out into the desert or into a very weird location, and you want to make sure that someone at least knows where you are. Don't just go out by yourself and assume that people just don't care about you, because a lot of people probably do and they want to know that you're safe. So if you're going out by yourself, at least let somebody know. As for fun stuff, we do have the skywatcher.threadless.com store. We have all kinds of stuff. We have shower curtains, beds or bedspreads. All kinds of cool stuff is actually up there. So go ahead and check that out. It's kind of weird seeing some of my images on a shirt. Anyway, but yeah, we've got shoes, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then I've got all kinds of other stuff in there as well. But that's skywatcher.threadless.com. Also, if you like the What's Up webcast, we also do have a podcast version of these where they've been pulled, and we have so you can get those wherever you get your podcasts. You can get that as well. Look up the What's Up webcast for Skywatcher as well. One stupid question. What's the black bit of the Star Adventure counterweight shaft for it? So the Star Adventure GTI has a little black threaded collar that the counterweight shaft threads into. That's an adapter that allows it to thread into both positions that the counterweight shaft can mount to. There's the standard position and there's the low latitude position. It's just an adapter. It comes with the mount and allows the counterweight shaft to thread in there on either one. So that's what that is for. So but anyway, that's it for today's episode. Thank you very much. Hopefully it was helpful. Go out, do some observing. Hopefully you've got some clear skies. And if you're going to be at Texas next week, we look forward to seeing you guys there. Again, we'll be there from Tuesday to Saturday. Stop by, say hi, and hopefully the weather changes to something better. Other than that, please have a safe weekend. Next week will be pre-recorded. We'll see you then. And then we will be back the week after to our usual episodes, and we'll be talking about how Texas Star Party went. So hopefully something happens that we can report back on. So anyway, have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you very much, and we appreciate it. We will see you guys in a couple weeks, and for some of you, we'll see you next week at Texas. Take care, clear skies, and have a good weekend. Bye.